The collaborative problem solving process is a cyclical process that we use at all levels. We use it, we're going to introduce a tool, our LAP-G, which is our planning guide for setting up MTSS in a second, and that is set up within a collaborative problem solving model. We also do this collaborative problem solving model when we're thinking about individual children who have really intensive needs and how do we design supports around them. So really we're problem solving at all levels and we cycle through it. So if it's not working, we cycle back through. What are the key concerns that we're having? How are we going to understand what's happening with those concerns, set goals, put a plan in place, and monitor progress? We also know with MTSS, as we started, we're focused on K-3. And that's really where MTSS has the most power, really preschool through third grade. Because the earlier we can understand the needs of students and take care of those needs, the better outcomes they have. So we want to have true prevention and early intervention and start MTSS in the earliest grades possible. We know we need to use evidence-based instruction. We're so fortunate in reading that we know a lot about what needs to be in place for good reading to happen. But it's not just about choosing the right kind of instructional programs, although that is important. We also need to make sure that they're well planned, that they're delivered in a very explicit and systematic way, that we're doing things like good active engagement, so children have lots of opportunities to actively respond and get feedback. We know all of that is part of good implementation of an evidence-based instructional approach. The other thing that we're going to talk about kind of throughout tonight is database decision-making. That's really the heart of MTSS. It's a diagnostic, precise approach where we're really understanding what are the needs of the children in front of us, how do we match our instruction to their needs and provide the correct intensity of instruction to make sure that they can catch up to grade level expectations. So database decision-making, I always think of as the heart. The core of MTSS. Because we want to be diagnostic, we want to be precise, and then once we put something in place, we need data to understand if what we've put in place, did we get it right? Is it helping the child grow to the level they need to? The other thing we're going to spend some time talking about, because I think this is, at least in my consultation work with schools, this is the piece that I find is one of the more challenging pieces for schools, is the coordination of our instruction across tiers. We don't want a different intervention than a core instructional approach and then a whole different set of interventions for tier 3. Students who have reading concerns need that coordinated approach because they need more practice with the skills that they are struggling with so that they can move on to the next level. So we're going to talk a lot about systems of intervention and how do we intensify those supports in a coordinated manner so that children are working on those key skills. And that starts in tier 1, and then that follows them all the way through the levels of support that they need to be successful. So I'll let Larissa talk about this, but we are going to introduce you to our tool that we use to help schools set up their MTSS process. And this tool was originally developed by myself and Dr. Tanya Ilo 25 years ago when I worked at the Special Education Regional Resource Center at CERC in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then Tanya went off to Nebraska and she used this tool to guide their Nebraska MTSS process. And then more recently at the center, we had an OSEP grant that we use. We kind of revised this tool and we used it within our OSEP grant. And it has really become a core tool that our center uses as we begin working with schools. So I'll let Larissa tell you more.
Yeah, and this tool and lots of resources to begin implementing the tool are on our website at readingscience.org. If you go under the K-12 section of our page and follow the pathway to the LAP-G modules, you'll see that there are videos, a facilitator guide, and the LAP-G tool itself. And as Amy said, this is really that first step that we take with schools and districts who are looking to improve their system. And again, it's not one thing, it's not a curriculum, a training. It's really a tool that will help you analyze the whole system, the overall health of that system. So you're going to look at curriculum, you're going to look at the instruction that's happening and the assessment system that is in place. And this tool really walks you through step by step, looking at those needs, and then in a really structured way too. So analyzing what the problem is, and then deciding on what are the things that we need to prioritize first to start to move our school in a direction with a healthy system in place for students. Teams are really able to prioritize. Maybe we need to look at curriculum first. Maybe we need a better assessment system in place to understand how severe the problem is. Often that's the first step with schools, because that database decision making is at the heart of MTSS. So the LAPG, or the Literacy Analysis and Planning Guide tool, is really that first step that schools can take, lead you through a structured process to take a look at all those pieces. And most often, schools will kind of assemble a team of maybe some central office, some school leaders in buildings, teachers, literacy coaches that the district might have, to really come together and work through this in a collaborative way.
And we have on our website a K3 version of the LAPG. We also have a preschool version. And Larissa, is our 4 through 6 version on our website, or is that still
It's
coming?
not yet. We still want to put just a few more eyes on it first.
But
Make
if you
sure we
do
have
work in
everything
4 through
covered.
6, Larissa has been working on that kind of upscaling of the LAPG, and I'm sure she'd be able to share it with you if you are interested ahead of time. But yes, all of these things are available for free. And as she said, there's also videos to kind of walk you through using it. But it's just a problem solving process to help you think about, what do you have in place and what do you still need to put into place? Because our goal is to have a system where we have, strong core so that we can handle the number of children who need intervention and that who need more intensive intervention. So our experience getting to be consultants in schools is that typically when we start with a school, their data does not look like this triangle. I don't know about you guys, but usually when schools are first beginning this work and they've reached out to us, their triangle might look more like this, where they have more, 80% of the kids who are well below benchmark, rather than 80% who are at or above benchmark. So that's not uncommon, at least not in my experience. And so that's okay. That's where we start. So some of the data we're going to share with you is from our partner school, Holy Family. And at the very end, Larissa is going to share some resources. And there's a webinar that Larissa and I did with the principal and the literacy specialist there that really walks through the specific pieces they put into place in their process. So if you're interested in kind of a more detailed example of this school, check out that webinar. It's on our center. There's also a little video that they made. So it is a nice example of a school that started with kind of the more red than green, and really changed that around. So this school, when we first started working with them, they had, if you look at third grade, they had 25% of their third graders on benchmark. So, not where they wanted to go, or not where they wanted to start, not what they wanted for their students. The thing about MTSS that I like to remind people is that it takes time, because reading development takes time and learning skills takes time. And it gets easier each year when you build those early childhood skills, and then those students continue on. And we know there's mobility, you get kids move in and all that good stuff. But we have definitely seen that with our schools over and over. Each year, students will start stronger, which makes it even more possible to take them further. Because, in this example, here's third grade at the same school. Their first year, as I said, only 25% of their students were at benchmark or above. But by year 3 and year 4, you can see that, they had more children getting closer to the benchmark at the start of the year. And by middle of the year, even more. We definitely have a summer slide problem at this school, just because of the resources available to their students in the summer. You can see by mid-year, kids each year were coming in stronger and stronger. So if you're not familiar with box plots, they're my absolute favorite kind of graph, because in one kind of figure, you can see the whole range of a class. So this is third grade. Year two of our work, we began year one kind of mid-year with them. So that's why there's a green box here. So this was year one. Then the blue is year two. So you can see at mid-year, there's where the 50th percentile is, that line right there. Top of the box is the 80th percentile. And then the bottom of the box is the 20th percentile. And then the whiskers or the lines are the more extreme scores. So you can see, especially if you look at the 20th percentile, each year, the 20th percentile was coming in stronger, which just means fewer children in need of intervention or fewer children in need of more intensive intervention. Then across time, they were getting more and more kids to benchmark. So it's not just a third grade issue or problem, right? We know it's all of the instruction they've had, before they've come to third grade, and how do we make sure that they're where they need to be each year. So one of the things with MTSS that we want to talk about tonight is this whole idea of how do we intensify instruction. Because students in tier one, they just need our good, strong instruction that is evidence-based and has all of the strong components of structured literacy. But we know we will have children who need more. So what does intensification of instruction really look like in a school? So I'm going to give a couple of examples that I hope are helpful. This is the first time I've done it this way, so I'm interested to see if this helps clarify things, because I find that this is one of the things that people often struggle with trying to wrap their brain around how to make happen in their schools. So this is kind of a key piece we wanted to talk through. So we know for students who are below where they need to be, who are struggling with reading, what they need is they need more opportunities to practice the skills that they do not have. And for right now, I want to focus on word recognition skills for simplicity in terms of the example, and then we will talk about tier two for oral language and language comprehension skills as well. But if you think about the development of reading, so think about kindergarten into first grade, and how a good structured literacy program begins with simpler skills like short vowels and consonants, and then as kids get consonant vowel consonant words, then we bring in, more complex things like blends and digraphs and, long vowels and so forth. And it's very systematic how we move children through that instructional progression, right? We don't, skipping around can cause confusion, and we know we want them to get those CBCs really solid before we move on to more complex kinds of skills, or it becomes confusing. So we know if a child is struggling, we want to pinpoint what skills they're struggling with and make sure our instruction is matching the skill level they're having difficulty with. We want to make sure that we have a structured instructional routine that focuses on the skill and not so much teacher talk, kind of reducing that cognitive load so they're really practicing key skills that they need support with. And they're practicing those key skills until they master them, and then they move on to the next complex skill, right, in terms of phonics or word recognition skills. So if we think about it that way, we really crucial that our tier two is in coordination with our tier one, so that those students who need more practice in tier two, that's what they're getting. And also in tier three, if they're in need of that. We also want to remember that our purpose of tier two isn't just to match where students are in terms of our instruction, but our purpose is to catch them up. They're behind where they need to be in reading, and we need to accelerate their growth in order to catch them up. So tier two intervention is acceleration. That's really what we're talking about and focusing on. So we need our instruction aligned with tier one, and we want to make sure it's accelerating. So the first step is assessing, understanding where our students are. So in tier one, we know we want a good universal screener, a screener that helps us know, are children on track or are they below where they need to be based on important reading benchmarks? So good universal screeners out there in K3, Acadians, AimsWeb, Dibbles 8, things that have research-based benchmark goals to help us know where kids should be and are they reaching those goals. So in tier one, we do a universal screener with everyone that tells us the level of concern or if they're on track. And then we also want to pair that with the curriculum-based assessment that helps us know for our specific curriculum Where are the students in terms of their skills? So we talk about this as an intervention-based diagnostic assessment. So we want to pinpoint in our phonics scope and sequence, where are they? What skills do they have? What skills are they still struggling with? And we use these two pieces. And we're big fans of doing diagnostic, intervention-based diagnostics in both phonics and spelling for word recognition, because we know those two things need to be taught in tandem and work together to help kids become strong readers and spellers. So we do our universal screener and our curriculum-based diagnostic, and we understand their needs, and we use that information to understand the needs of our classroom. So is everybody at the same level? If so, I could do my word recognition in whole group. If I have kids at very different levels, which is the typical, at least in my experience, then I really need to think about how do I meet the needs of my different skills in my classroom. And that usually means working in groups. And so we place kids in groups. When we work with schools, we also encourage them to look at planning their tier 1 and their tier 2 at the same time, because tier 1 and tier 2 work together. And so as you're thinking about what am I going to do, again, we're going to stick with word recognition for a little bit. What am I going to do to take care of word recognition skills in my tier 1? I also at the same time want to think about tier 2, because you're going to have kids who need more. So think about those things together, because they have to work together. So let's talk about catching kids up in acceleration and what that might look like. So again, oh, sorry, Larissa, was there a question?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in class again with you. Like, should I raise my hand? So we had somebody ask a question about a diagnostic assessment. So
Yeah.
I'll try to clarify. It just said diagnostic assessment question mark. So feel free if that person wants to tell me a little bit more about their question. But Amy is not pointing to any one particular diagnostic assessment. A diagnostic assessment for word recognition, hopefully the phonics program that you're using has one specifically attached to it that aligns with that scope and sequence, because it'll tell you exactly what skills are breaking down and kind of point you into the right direction for where you need to pick up instruction with that student. Curriculum
Yep,
assessment.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
right,
Another way to say it is like a placement test.
Yes.
Although I think it's more than just a placement test, because placement tests are usually not very extensive. But good structured literacy programs do have something that's more thorough that helps here's where the student is, and it's not just where they are, but they might say go ahead and start on this lesson, but they might be missing a few things previously and that kind of thing. So it lets you pinpoint. The key is it lets you pinpoint where they are, and good structured literacy interventions and core programs have those. So
yeah. I think too, they help like, well, these students know these skills really well, like automatically. These skills they know, but they're just not solid on them yet. So we might need to provide a little bit more practice there before moving on to other skills, or incorporate them into our planned lesson already that we're thinking about.
Great question. So something to think about in terms, because again, this is another place that I see schools sometimes struggling a little bit in terms of how to implement. So again, tier 2 is acceleration. The students aren't where they need to be, and we need to catch them up. So this is my little, I'm trying this out on you to see if this helps make sense, because this is something I often get a lot of questions about. And so I'm trying this out so you can tell me if it helps or not. So let's think about early first grade. And let's pretend at the top, the blue, these are number of lessons. So lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, and so forth. And again, for the sake of example, let's say the beginning part, lesson 1 through lesson 10 is really still focusing on consonants, short vowels, and CVC words, okay? And beginning of first grade, we expect kids to be at a lesson 11 as they come into our first grade program. And this is where we're starting to work on consonant digraphs, blend, and long vowel sounds. So pretty typical for first grade word recognition sequence. So in the next two boxes, I have the number of instructional days. Okay, so our on-track kids, they are lesson 11. And so as they progress on day 1, they do lesson 11. On day 2, lesson 12. lesson 13, and so forth, right? So they're going to be, one lesson a day. So that is kind of how this program is set up. So let's say we have a group of kids who are on track. They're just going to go one lesson a day as planned. But then we have a group of kids who really are still struggling with a lot of consonants and short vowels. So they are actually on lesson 1. Okay. So you can see from my kids who are on track and my kids who are below where they need to be, there's a 10 lesson gap. All right. So there's 10 lesson gap. So we know if the kids on track do lesson 1 on day 1 and so forth. And if we have our kids who are below where they need to, if they also do just 1 lesson a day, after 10 days, the kids who are well below where they need to be are on lesson number 10, right? And the kids who are on track, are they still on lesson 11? No, of course not. They are on lesson 20. So we still have a 10 day or a 10 lesson. There's still 10 lessons behind. And so sometimes in school, when I first start working with them, I see, maybe they're doing a good job and they've figured out where kids are and they place kids in tier 1 in different groups, but everybody just gets 1 lesson a day. So if I'm 10 lessons behind, I'm always going to be 10 lessons behind if I just get 1 lesson a day, right? If I do my differentiated core instruction, but I'm not doing anything to accelerate, I'm always going to be 10 lessons behind. So I don't do anything to close the gap. So the other thing sometimes I see in schools is they say, okay, for tier 2, I'm going to put them exactly where they need to be. And they're going to get a small group and I'm going to start with lesson 1. But for tier 1, I'm going to go where most of my kids are. All of the kids in the class or majority of kids in the class, let's say are at lesson 11. So this is the grade level expectation. So everybody gets the grade level expectation 1 day a week. And then my kids who are below, I'm going to get them what they need in intervention, but they're still getting what they need 1 day at a time. And I would say that's even worse because let's pretend that lesson 1 is working on the S, we're working on, and let's say we're also working on the short A's and A. And let's say a lesson 11 is working on SH, the digraph. I'm a child who's struggling with reading, and you just showed me that S says, I'm also learning the H sound, but now it's saying sh. Little confusing, right? The worst example, which I see all the time in first grade, is long vowel and short vowel. I'm not solid on my short vowels, but in the core, I'm learning long vowels, but in my intervention, I'm learning short vowels, and I'm doing neither any service because I'm even more confused. So what do we want to do instead? So what we don't want to do is do 1 lesson at a time. And the other thing we don't want to do is keep our core on grade level and keep our intervention where kids are. Because again, then they're learning 2 skills. And remember, for acceleration, we need more practice with the skills that we're weakened and right in the spot that we need to developmentally. So instead, we want to accelerate. And so again, I have my on-track kids getting 1 lesson a day, and they end at lesson 20 in 10 days. So what I want to do with my kids who are in tier 2, in their core and in their tier 2, across those 2 things, I want to give them 2 lessons a day. We call them kind of scoops in one of our schools, named them because it sounds like ice cream. That sounds nice. I want to get 2 scoops a day. Sometimes that is a different lesson each day. So again, the little boxes at the bottom are the days, and at the top are the lessons. So for day 1, they did lesson 1 in tier 1, and then they did lesson 2 in tier 2. And then on day 2, they did lesson 3 in tier 1, and then they did lesson 4 in tier 2. And then you can see how it proceeds. And you can see, on day 4, lesson 7 was a little tricky. So they actually did that twice because they needed more practice with that lesson. So it's not as simple as just progressing 1 at a time. Here is also where database decision-making is crucial. Good structured literacy intervention programs, they have little checks to help you know, did kids master those skills? Do they need another experience with this lesson because they didn't quite get it? So it's not as simple as just doing 2 lessons each day. You still want to follow the child and understand their instructional needs, and are they progressing? So you progress based on data, not just what the lesson sequence tells you. And so now you can see with this example, some days they needed the same lesson across tier 1 and tier 2. Some days they could get double. So they didn't completely shrink in those 10 days, but you can see now they are only 4 lessons behind versus 10 lessons behind. And you can imagine if you play this forward, this can catch kids up. And that's our goal. And it's a very possible goal in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Becomes less possible the longer we wait in terms of intervention. And we have absolutely seen this. And in our presentation, you'll hear Michelle, the literacy specialist at Holy Family, tell you in their 2nd grade, their intervention students actually surpassed their on-track kids. And then they realize, oh, wait, now we're all on track and we can have a bigger group of instruction, and then we can have a larger group. So this is also an example of how many groups do I need is really dictated by what your data says and how are you meeting their instructional needs. So the purpose, again, is to catch kids up. The other thing we want to do, in addition to our monitoring of their skills within the lesson and are they ready for the next lesson, we also want to make sure, is this powerful enough to catch them up to those key reading benchmarks? And for that, we want to use our progress monitoring assessment. So again, I'm just going to stick with Acadians because that's what we have in our examples. We want to make sure that we are assessing them weekly. And is our tier 2 strong enough to get them to those global outcome measures that we know are important for reading growth? Because it's not just about our curriculum, it's about, is our curriculum, is our intervention, is it enough to get kids to where they need to be? If not, then we have to go back and problem solve and think about, okay, we got to put more powerful things in place. So weekly, we would progress monitor, and we're going to talk about data meetings. We keep track of if kids are making progress, and if they're not making progress, we want to make adjustments. Sometimes those adjustments mean, gosh, this kid is really a puzzle to me. Everybody else in tier 2 is making growth, and this child really isn't. Now I really want to intensify. In tier 3, we talk about having a team built around a child to problem solve and think about, why is our tier 2 that works for everybody else not working for this child or a small group of children? This is really a topic for another whole webinar, which we actually are planning. We're hoping to do a webinar just around tier 3 sometime soon. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. Our data from tier 2 informs, if tier 3 is going to be needed or not. And tier 3 is just going to provide more opportunities to intensify that instruction to get kids to where they need to be. I'm going to let Larissa talk a little bit about the importance of regular data meetings to understand and keep track of all of those children who are at different levels of intervention.
I was just typing a response to one of our friends. So hopefully I answered that question, but feel free to keep putting some questions in the chat if not. So the importance of regular data meetings, it really is an opportunity to bring teams together. So grade level teams could be the principal or a literacy coach, reading specialists, Title I teachers, ESL teachers, classroom teachers, even the instructional aides or paraprofessionals that might be working with your grade level or classroom. And it's an opportunity to really put eyes on all of the progress monitoring data that you are collecting. Often teams are able to identify some overall trends or some individual student trends at that time. And then really using that data to make some informed decisions. I think sometimes when you're right in the intervention or working with the students, you might have this perception that, gosh, they really seem to be doing really well. And they might be with those skills, but it might not be showing up on our global outcome measures yet or with our progress monitoring data, which is really what we want to rely on to really make big decisions for kids. We also might have the perception that they're doing really well and then they're not, or we might feel like, gosh, they don't seem to be doing very well. But then when you put eyes on the data, you do see that they are making progress. And for me, collecting that data was always really motivating and inspiring, knowing that, oh, wow, I see that I'm making a difference. Or if I wasn't getting great data, it really gave me an opportunity to reflect on what was happening with that student as well. So getting eyes on that data and using that data to make decisions is big. Accountability and ownership. Everybody has a different role when they come to those data meetings, whether it's collecting the data and making sure that it's put in to a system, a spreadsheet in time, and or maybe printing data sheets out. Maybe somebody who's in charge of note taking, they make sure that they have that ready to go. But really, people come to those data meetings with some type of role, accountability, or ownership, and that having that shared ownership that these are not just the teacher's students, but these are all of our students really can make a difference as well. Collaborating during those meetings, talking about what you're seeing, what are they seeing. Amy mentioned those scoops. We make sure that in the schools that we're working with, that the teacher is always responsible for one of those scoops so that they're working with those students every day, not just a reading specialist or Title I teacher doing all of the intervention with the students who are off track. So they're really able to come together because the timeline during a school day doesn't always allow teachers to have that opportunity to sit and talk about kids. This is that opportunity to say, here's what I'm noticing, or gosh, maybe it's a student who's got something going on at home and the reading interventionist didn't even know about that. So it's a time to come together and really discuss all of those things as well. And then the most exciting part at the end of the meeting is really thinking about what changes are we going to make based on this data, and then who's really responsible for those changes. So everybody leaves kind of maybe with one little task, or talk to somebody in the office about calling home. Maybe it's to gather some materials for a center that we want to put together to provide some extra practice. But really leaving that meeting with kind of a next step or a task. And then something else that we find is that maybe working with a grade level team of teachers, they identify a need. They'll say, could you come in and explain that a heart word routine to me? Or our students are learning their letter sounds, but I need to provide some more blending practice. So can you help me with a blending routine, and can you show me how to do that? And then somebody from the team can say, I'm good at that, or I've got something for that. So it really leads to professional growth and learning with each other, where we can say, me as the literacy consultant might say, you know what, I'll cover your class for you so that you can go show her that because she's the expert. Or maybe it's something the literacy consultant or coach or even the principal can go in and share with a teacher or an instructional assistant, reading specialist, ESL teacher, whatever.
And I think the key is too, you're really looking at those progress monitoring graphs as a team. So a child's not left in an ineffective intervention for too long, right? So we're really making those timely decisions so that kids can get what they need with all of their important adults in the room. I do want to go back because I see a question that maybe might be helpful to make sure is clear. So with our accelerated approach, where kids are getting 2 lessons in a day, there was a question about, do they get the core lesson and an intervention lesson? So no, we are placing them where they need to be, and then they're getting 2 lessons where they need to be. So for my simplistic example, they're starting at lesson 1, and they are going to get lesson 1 on day 1, and then they're also going to get lesson 2 on day 1. So exactly where they need to. And one of the things that I think I hear in these questions, because there's another question about review, these are assuming that you're using a strong structured literacy program or approach. And one of the things we have found, which is a challenge with our materials, is that core programs sometimes don't have enough practice and review for our kids who are struggling. So it's twofold. They're behind, and reading is hard. And so it takes them longer to pick up these skills. And so what we have done, and I'll just tell you, the program at our partner school that we use is 95% group. And there's other programs too. This is just the one I use right now, so it's in my head. So with 95% group, they have a core program, And then they also have phonics lesson library. So in this example of these kiddos in first grade, this group of kids that we took back to one, it would be in phonics lesson library because that has built in much more practice and much more both blocked practice on new skills and then cumulative review and space, excuse me, space practice. We actually have even increased that for kids in intervention because those are the kids who need more opportunities to master a skill before they can move on. And so those kids in their tier one time in their small group, we may meet with them for half an hour versus the on-track kids, their lesson's going to go faster because they don't need as many opportunities to practice. So they might be in a 20-minute group. So that's the other piece that happens. But they're getting tier one and tier two in the same phonics lesson library in that example. So we're using the intervention material because we want to accelerate them so they can catch up with the skills of the students who are on track. I hope that helps because I think the common model for MTSS, or not model, but the common approach to MTSS might be the approach I started with. You get grade level in whole group, and then your tier two is differentiated down. But then that was my example of the S and the SH, where I find that causes more confusion to a child. So I want to take them where they are, but I'm not going to just go one lesson at a time and always keep them 10 lessons behind. I'm going to accelerate them so that they can eventually catch up to their peers. That's the difference. Hope that helped. So. All right, so let's think, okay, you might be thinking, okay, that sounds great, Amy and Larissa, but how does this work in a real school day? So this is one of our partner schools. This is their real schedule. And so you can see they're doing all of the different pieces. And one of the key things at this school is that they do have small group instruction time. And during that small group instruction time, that's where the classroom teacher meets with a small group. And then we try to help schools do the model where they push in other specialists so that we talk about flooding tier one with adults to try to maximize our instructional time with them. Not that it can't be done with just one teacher, but you're going to maximize your time. And instead of a Title I or a literacy specialist or an SLP pulling a child out when works for them, we worked really hard with the instructional leader, the principal, to make the schedules work so that during this small group time, we could push in supports that just made everything work better. So that's the ideal. And so one of the things we know when we think about small group work is we want to make sure we want the teacher to do that great structured literacy routine, but we want to make sure the time when they're not with the teacher, they're either with another adult getting intervention or other kind of support, or they're in really meaningful centers. And so one of the things we think about with meaningful centers is we want to make sure our centers, oh, there it is. I was like, I knew I had a little at the bottom. We want to make sure our centers are engaging. They're connected to our core instruction where they've learned something and now they're having time to practice it. They can be done at an independent level, so they don't need their adult coming over and guiding them. And then it's easy for a teacher to manage. We've also seen teachers who, bless their hearts, they're spending lots and lots of time creating intricate centers when really the best center, in my opinion, is practicing something they've done in whole group that now they need more time to work on that. And so we think of really trying to build that off of your core instructional approach. So we have in our kind of instructional program at our partner school, a language time, which is an oral language activity that gets them ready for their writing activity. And so there can be an extension of activity from that. The read aloud and a writing piece, there can be something extended with that. In our program, we use a knowledge building program. We use core knowledge as part of the components, which has lots of fun knowledge stuff. So we have building knowledge centers. So I know in first grade recently, they were studying the solar system. So there was a really fun solar system center that had meaningful things, but yet they could do independently. I also think a center that follows the teaching center that might have handwriting practice or reading a decodable or spelling, again, depending on the grade level and all of those good things can be helpful. So one of the things I just want to show you as an example, I'm going to skip through this a little bit, is really thinking about this time to, if you can, flood the core with adults, because you can take care of your tier two, both for word recognition or foundational skills and for language comprehension skills, because we know we have students who also need more supports in language comprehension. And I know we don't have time to go into all the nitty gritty. All of these things could be their own webinar, but we just want to show you kind of some of the practicality of how this could look. All right, so here's an example. If there's only one teacher and we just don't have their adults and tier two happens outside of this time. So in this example, let's just pretend it's kindergarten. If there's a blue star, that means this group of students has word recognition concerns. They're well below in word recognition. If it has a yellow star, that means at least some of the kids in this group also have a concern with language comprehension. They're below benchmark in language comprehension. So this group, you can see, has a yellow star. These are kids who need language comprehension support. And then blue star, this is only kids who just have word recognition. So we have a group that has both concerns, we have a group that has one concern, and we have a group that has the other concern. And then we have just one group, in this case, on track. And we know our groups can look all different. You might have 3 on track groups and one group that is, below in word recognition or below in language comp. And so that's kind of where Larissa began. MTSS looks different depending on your data. And the data really guides what our group needs, because it's really based on our students' needs. So this classroom, it have pretty different skill needs. And so small groups were really important in this example. And so if you look just at group 1, here's what their rotation through centers or small group time might look like. We start with the classroom teacher. The classroom teacher would meet with this group a little bit longer because it has the most significant needs. Then there would be independent practice. Then they would go to a language center, and they would go to their building knowledge center. Okay, so they rotate through different centers. And so you can see that with each group. So what might this look like if I did have some support in a classroom? Sorry, people keep getting in my way of my slides. I can't see my slides. Sorry. I close out the chat. That's what I did. So what might this look like? And I know this looks crazy and busy at first, but let me walk you through it. Let's say that we have a literacy specialist who's able to come for the first 35 minutes of our small group time. So now let's look at group 1. These are, the group 1 that has both the most significant needs because they have needs in both language comprehension and word recognition skills. So the literacy specialist works first with this group and gives them the first scoop of their word recognition intervention. So again, in my example, this might be lesson 1 of our structured literacy reading intervention for word recognition. And then those students, some of those students have language comprehension needs, so they stay with the literacy specialist, and the literacy specialist works with a group on language comprehension. And there's a group of kids in group 3, and this group in group 1 works with the literacy specialist to get oral language comprehension intervention. And then these kids go to building knowledge, and then they get a second lesson on word recognition with their teacher. So that's their second scoop of the structured phonics lesson. And again, the literacy specialist and the classroom teacher would be using the same program. They just get more opportunities to practice it. So in this example, you can see with just having the literacy specialist there for just 35 minutes, now this teacher only has one group she might need to see at another time do tier 2. She got 3 other groups of kids taken care of with both tier 1 and tier 2. So when we're able to structure things and really help get intervention done in a time that is helpful to students and also to that classroom teacher, we see stronger reading outcomes. Because the other thing that happens if that literacy specialist or speech language pathologist or ESL teacher, whoever it is, if they come during a different time and pull that child out of a time that's not great for them to miss instruction, now they may have started with a reading problem, but they're always pulled out of math. What happens? Now they also have a math problem. And I saw that a lot when I worked in schools. So this model really thinks of instruction and intervention together, and how do we maximize instructional time and intervention effects. And that's where that leadership part is really key. Once we were able to help instructional leaders see this, it honestly became a no-brainer. It became, now I'm utilizing my specialists much more effectively. And what we found is specialists also really liked it because they knew they weren't pulling their kids out of something important when they were working with them on also something important. So this is also from our partner school, Holy Family, and this is explained in their video if you want to see more. But one of the big work was to really think about the schedules. In their school, they had 80% of their students are English language learners. So they have an ELL teacher there 3 days a week. So really strategically utilizing her for oral language intervention. And then they have a Title I teacher, and then they had a reading interventionist as well. So every school has different specialists, so it looks slightly differently. But even just with one specialist supporting, you can see how intervention gets taken care of much more easily than if you have to find intervention time, especially if you have, like in this classroom, 3 groups of kids who have tier 2 needs. That's a lot of tier 2 to figure out if you can't push in some supports. And sometimes we have instructional assistants who can learn how to do things to support kids as well. It doesn't always have to be a specialist. At one of our schools, we have a really wonderful retired nun who does the oral language intervention, and she is fabulous. So it's all about thinking about your school and what are the resources at your school, and how do you leverage those resources to make sure we can, change reading outcomes for kids. So this is one of our partner schools who implemented this kind of model. And just if you look at the end of the year, sorry, my Zoom keeps getting in the way of my slides. If you look at the end of the year, this was their first year implementing MTSS. You can see even the 80th percentile didn't reach benchmark at the end of the year in kindergarten. The second year implementing MTSS, 50% was at or above benchmark. The third year, 75% of their kindergartners were at or above. And even if they all didn't get to benchmark, look at that growth, right? That is substantial growth. The third year, their 20th percentile was almost where their 80th percentile was their first year. So these things are powerful. And again, I love early intervention. I love preschool and kindergarten because you see this, right? You see these dramatic increases when you can get instruction right. And then these kids go on to first grade, making the first grade teacher's job easier, and so on. So it's really, additive in terms of its power of a program. And that's the other thing. We started with this, and this is a good thing as we're beginning to wrap up. It is a prevention early intervention model. If we can get kids on track, we can, one, them on track, and then they don't have to fail. They don't have to be second and third graders who fail. It also is a much more efficient model because then second and third grade can take care of things in an easier way. So when we talk with educator or leaders, we always say, put your resources in K1. Not that we don't care about those older grades, of course we do, but if we can take care of the problem and get those kids on track, it's so much easier to manage those older grades when kids come in where they need to be, right? All right, Larissa, you want to wrap us up? Sorry, I went a little bit long. Sorry.
Yeah, no, there's some great comments and questions. Somebody asked or commented, so every grade level has a different small group time. And we have found that schools often do need to build that time into their schedule to get that double scoop in, whether it's the classroom teacher hopefully is getting to do that double scoop if they didn't see the students earlier in the day, or if a specialist has to support again during that small group time. But we do in K3 at this particular building, they do each have some small group time built into their day, and some grade levels more than others. But again, it's really determined like how many students are going to need more practice, more time for a second lesson, that determines how much time that they get.
And the number of kids on track in second and third increased. So like at the beginning of the year in third grade, the majority of the kids were on track. So we had the largest, we really had two groups. We really had the on track group, and then we had a one group that was getting small group differentiation versus in kindergarten, it's more like four groups or in first grade. So it does, again, if you take care of it in K1, second and third grade can do more in whole group because kids are more where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more students are starting the year off on track, which is making the teacher's job easier. Because at first, think about that data that Amy showed at the very beginning. That was a really overwhelmed system where lots of kids needed lots of second scoops, and now less students need that second scoop to be successful. Um, oh, good. So some people are seeing some other favorite other books right here. Effective Universal Instruction. That is also one of my favorites. That's the one I pulled off the shelf for this meeting. I love the Keeping RTI on Track book. Stephanie Stoller shared this one with the doctoral students. This one has a lot of barriers that we often face in schools and kind of what to do about it or things to think about. So I think that one's a nice quick, it's almost like a pamphlet. It's a pretty slim little book, but a really easy and engaging read. I think I've read it like 3 times. I love it. Any of your favorites you wanted to point out, Amy?
The data-driven school is a newer one, and same thing with untangling database decision making. I think they're nice. They both highlight the problem-solving model and how to use that model to really think about both your systems level problem solving as well as individual children. So those are kind of newer reads that are helpful. My favorite of all time is probably MTSS for young children because I just love Judy Carter so much. But it is more focused on preschool. If you're in the preschool world, the two over here, Handbook of Response to Intervention in Early Childhood and MTSS for young children are great.
Mm-hmm. I know Maria just recently picked up the Untangling one. She was excited about reading that one. Yeah. So here are the goodies that we wanted to share with you. In addition to the LAPG tool itself, the facilitator guide, and the modules, there's actually an article. When did that come out? I think like in April, May, spring.
Of the LAPG?
Yeah, that you wrote.
Yeah,
your article. That article is attached there. You can also find it on our website, but I put in some QR codes if you didn't want to pop it on over there. The video, Raising Reading Outcomes, which is a really nice interview with some of the folks at our partner school that tell the story of where they started and where they have gone to. And then a new tool that we've been working on at the center, we wanted to capture those really awesome, productive, functional data meetings that we've been having at the school. So the principal there, Katie, and I collaborated on a data form that really could lead another team through the process of kind of what steps we go through. And we really only have, I think, about maybe 35, 40 minutes max for those data meetings. Yeah. We get a lot done. We get eyes on every student and every student's progress monitoring graph. So just for context, and there's usually about 5 to 6 people in the room. Someone always takes on the facilitator role. Someone takes on the note-taking role, and someone is our timekeeper. So that tool is there. And I also just linked it on our website as well. And it is on the K-12 resources section of our page under right at the top, and it's called Monthly Data Analysis Meeting Form. It's a Google Doc, and it'll force you to make a copy if I did it right. So we'll see. But if not, shoot me a message and I'll fix it. But yeah. Somebody asked what our website was, www.readingscience.org.
Yeah. We are kind of amazed that we got that domain name, readingscience.org. Really easy to remember. Yeah. And I don't know what these yellow lines are, Larissa. I don't know what I did.
I don't know.
Somehow I drew on. I don't know how I did that.
I love it. It adds to the flavor. But we just wanted to leave off with that again. Our shared belief is that good instruction is good instruction, and good instruction should be accessible to all students, not depending on where they go to school. Or what kinds of things they have going on in their lives, but we do believe that all students their needs can be met with good systems in place. And from our experience, we meet teachers who really want that for their students. And sometimes they just don't have the tools or the resources that they need to make that happen. So hopefully the things that we've shared with you tonight have been helpful, and please reach out to either one of us if you have questions. We will share the recording and the slides with all of you as well.
Yeah. And if you have ideas for other webinars that would be helpful, as you might have seen, we kind of have a series around MTSS this I guess, is it fall still, moving into winter? Dr. Renata Archie is going to be talking about MTSS and leadership in a few weeks. She's fabulous. So if you have other ideas for, webinars that you would like from the center, feel free to reach out to me or Larissa and give us some ideas, because we're happy to do that. We are thinking of a tier 3 one, so that's coming, but yes, others, we're open to ideas. So thank you so much for your time this evening on this Wednesday evening. Thanks so much. We appreciate all of your good work with students and teachers, and thanks for your interest in learning more. So, there's
right
Dr.
now.
Archie right now.
You're actually next week, right, Renata?
Oh, is it next week? Okay.
Yeah, next Wednesday.
Come see Dr. Archie next week.
Yes.
How are you? It's good to see you.
This was so awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Can't hear it enough. And it, just all the detail of it, and it can be. Yeah.
Thanks. So what did you think, if anybody can unmute too, what did you think? Was my little dosage thing, was that more confusing or less confusing? Like I said, I'm always trying to explain that whole idea of intensity. Okay. You like that, Renata?
Yes, you can tell me. Like you said, that they get group 1 gets lesson 1 and 2 in one day. That was very clear.
That helped? Okay. It's so, it's like one of those things that's so clear in my brain, but I feel it's hard. It's hard for schools. And I understand that it's hard. And I've always struggled with how to succinctly explain it. So maybe I'm getting closer. So thanks for your attention.
I think the biggest thing is having you present, the work that you're doing, having you present in the building, and having that coaching support.
Coaching is huge. Yeah.
To help put all these pieces in place.
Yeah, it's complex. Yeah, it definitely is. And there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think the coaching of the principal too, right? And I know that's kind of what you're going to be talking about in terms of leadership, is really helping the principal navigate all of those things and all of the humans involved in decision making and schedule. That's what we always joke with, some of our principals, is really, it's all about the schedule with MTSS, right? How do we schedule people in the right places to provide the right level of support? So
yeah, and I think that's sometimes when people hear about that double dose versus, getting the core and then getting the intervention, even if they're aligned, like you were saying, we're taking a student who's already struggling with reading and possibly confusing them, confusing them.
Yeah.
And they're not, most students who are struggling with reading, they do have a word recognition problem. And it's not that they need something different, they need more.
Yeah.
So those two things really have always resonated with me. I think you said them years and years ago, but they need more. It's not that they need something different. So when I walk into the schools and I see everything but the kitchen sink on the shelves, they've invested a lot of time and training in a lot of materials, but we're really overwhelming our students.
Yeah.
When we have that approach. And I do think it is challenging to wrap your head around that double dose of, those lessons. And I think the schedule is the barrier, but if you can start to knock down some of those walls, or even just start small, just start with kindergarten, that's a good place to start with that approach, because schools want to push back on that, because it doesn't feel like school should feel. It doesn't feel like a typical approach that you would take, but I would start with those barriers and knock them down, and start small. Start with one grade level, one classroom.
Yeah. And start with the earliest grade level possible, so that you can reap the benefits in the next grade level. Start in preschool even.
Somebody has their hand up. Miguel. I hope I'm saying the name right. Miguel Bolden.
Guess what?
Oh,
yes,
it's Miguel. Hold on.
Guess what?
Micah, wait, Micah.
Guess
tell me later, okay? Sorry.
That's okay. I love to hear those little voices. I have a Micah too, so
Oh,
my
for,
Micah's 19 though, so not
okay.
quite so cute.
So what's the great name, Micah?
Okay, great. I see it. Yep, that's
Fun.
great. Okay, so when you went to your chart and it says lesson one, is it literally lesson one or is that like that particular concept? And then when they receive the tier two intervention, it's the same concept. It's not literally them reteaching lesson one, right?
It's literally the lesson. So I just used one as the example, but so for example, at our partner school, they have a list of all of the lessons and they will, circle where they are so that the intervention teacher knows exactly I finished this one and then you go to the next one. They have like a little coding system. If I circled it, it means they're ready to move on. If I've checked it, it means like review this. So that way, if I didn't master what was in lesson one, if lesson one was too difficult, then I'm going to do that one again because we don't want to just keep moving kids on without mastery. I think that's the other key that I see in schools is we just go on to the next lesson regardless. And really for our struggling readers, really all readers, but particularly our strugglers, if they're having trouble, let's just say they're having trouble with short A, you don't want to go on and introduce a whole nother vowel until that one is shored up, at least enough shored up that you know that they're going to be built in review and all that good stuff. But if they're still kind of completely clueless, you really want to stick there until you feel like, okay, they're getting it. I know there's going to be some review, so I can move on. And that's really that precision teaching that we're talking about. So using instructional programs that do have those built in, we talk about them as mastery monitoring checks, so that there's a little check across the lesson. When I asked them to do this, at the beginning in the little visual drill is one example that I've seen. Did they get it or were they completely lost? That means they need more practice. And then I'm going to repeat that same lesson. And here's the thing about repeating the same lesson. They don't have to worry about the instruction or the routine. They're focused on the skill. And so really making sure our teacher talk is at a minimum, and that's what structured literacy is all about, very precise language, so that the child is working on the skill they need. They have enough language so that they know what to do and they have the instruction, but that, those things can kind of go to the almost to the subconscious. Like I know what she's going to ask me when she pulls out that paper because I know the routine. This is where I'm reading the connected text and I already know what she's going to say. She's going to start here and read each word, and that kind of thing. Or I see the cards coming out. I know we're going to do a little practice of my sounds. So we want the routines to kind of go underground so that kids are really focusing on the skill work and the practice. When we have different routines and different interventions, kids become focused on the procedural things and they get confused and they're at like cognitive overload because they're like, okay, Larissa is holding this up and asking me to do something different. But when I worked with Renata, she was asking me to do this with this. And little things can cause big confusion. That's why we like to stay in the same instructional program so that the routines and the expectations, as I said, kind of go underground as the kids learn them and they're really focusing on practicing the skills.
We often use the example, like if you're using one program in tier one and they're calling it Magic-E, and then their tier two program that they're using is calling it Silent-E. We have kids who might think that's two totally different things when really it's the same concept. Shannon
little brains are going, what is Silent-E?
Yeah.
And then the teacher's like going on and doing beautiful instruction, but the kid's like, what does silent mean it doesn't talk? So it's like, we don't want that to distract them. We want that to become routine, and then the focus is on the skills. Yeah.
And then Shannon, you have a question. Did you want to unmute?
There, I'm going to put my video on just so you can see me. Hi. We just started implementing this model in our school. Great. And we're getting pushback from the district. They're open to it. We had a meeting today and they want me to present the entire plan next week. And their biggest concern is that we're going to create more gaps by double dose. They're not understanding the double dosing part, I think. And so we're going to share that with them. But I guess what I'm saying is we've also only had a phonics curriculum for this is our second year. Prior to that, it was balanced literacy. So we have third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders who have missing gaps because they
Yeah.
didn't have.
Yep.
Okay, so anyway, we're flex grouping our second grade, the entire grade level, and we've had to pull together the teachers, and certain teachers are taking certain groups, and we did diagnostics assessments so we could inform where they should be on the scope and sequence. They're just concerned, are they going to be through the second grade scope and sequence before? That's what they want them to be, is on through the scope and sequence before they get to third grade. And then we're using UFly. How we're doing it is they're getting a day one, and another part of the day they're getting a day two, the very lowest group. There is two groups that don't get the double dose. We don't have the manpower, but eventually that lowest group is going to catch up to them. Then we're going to double dose all of them and keep moving on through the scope and sequence. I guess my question to you is, how do I explain to them it's not, I guess it's not about being at the end of the second grade sequence at the end of the year. It's really about mastering those skills and progressing. And these kids, I mean, face it, we're going to come back in third grade. We might have to go back for 10, 15 skills, come back.
Yeah.
I just want to know how to convey it because I feel like I'm a lone person here. My principal is 100% on board.
Good.
The building is 100% on board. I get pushback from the district. And I just want to be able to present it. And they also are open to us piloting this to perhaps bring it out to the whole district next year. But I want to do it right. I don't want to mess up. So,
Well, first of all, it sounds like you're doing amazing. Like that was impressive what you just shared. I think one of the things that might be helpful, I've done this at least, is I've brought a scope and sequence because I think part of it is they don't understand how reading develops. Right. And you can show them the scope and sequence and say, see, how we start with consonants and then there's some vowels and then we build small words. And then it gets into more complex things like, digraphs and long vowels. And with reading, we can't skip over big chunks of things or it doesn't make sense, right? Like it really is a developmental progression through simpler things to more complex things. So, and that's what I was trying to do with my little 1 in 20.
Yeah.
It's really kind of saying, if I have simple over here, short vowels, and I have, more complex over here, digraphs and long vowels, if I want kids to be at grade level, if I just start here and I know they're over here, they are missing all of these things. And so this is not going to make sense. This lesson, I mean, they might get parts of it, but it's not going to be as impactful because you're not working where they are. So with reading, you have to start where they are. You may wish that they weren't there, but if wishes were horses, what's that sign? Yeah. So then we're like, okay, how can I get them there as quickly as possible? That's the acceleration part. That's exactly what it sounds like you're doing. That's where I want to give them more. But my caution would be when we explain it to them is saying, I'm hoping to do 2 lessons a day, but that's not always going to work because sometimes I'm going to see, oh, they're not getting it. I don't want to progress because I know if I progress too far, they lose that and they don't get what they need. It's really that idea of mastery and that idea of, we're creating neural networks in their brain. And if a neural network is weak, like if they don't have it very strong and I've moved on too quickly, it's gone, right? And then I'm starting back again, like what you just said. Then we're starting it all over again in third grade. So, there's a old saying, I think it's an Orton Gillingham saying is as fast as we can, but as slow as we must. I kind of like that saying just because it kind of reminds us we want to give the child as much as we can, but we also know we want to make sure they're mastering things before we move on to a more complex area of skills. Because if we move on too fast, and there's definitely a science behind this, and that's why I always also say we need our most skilled people working with our least skilled children because it's not as easy as just saying do 2 lessons every day. I wish it was that easy. Then I could have anybody do it. But not anybody can be a reading teacher. Actually, just recently, somebody was asking me because they were observing our tier 3, which was done by a very skilled person who has a dyslexia specialist. And she was very skilled. She was following a structured routine. And the person asked me, he's like, Amy, does it have to be a skilled person? And this is a child who is about to be identified with dyslexia. And I said, yes. I said, I wish it didn't. But in this case, she needs all that knowledge to make those adjustments that she's making to make it work for that child. So, we want to try to prevent, I'm not saying in tier 2 we need that, but definitely in tier 3. And I think it needs to be guided with somebody with a great experience who's checking in and saying, oh, you know what, I think we moved on too fast. And that's those data meetings. The data doesn't lie. The data tells us. If we look at the data and we say, gosh, they're not making the growth we need. So those monthly progress monitoring data meetings where we look at the progress monitoring, not just our mastery monitoring, and we say, Renata's making great growth, but Larissa, there's something happening. And then we have to look at why. Sometimes it's because she's missed school, or sometimes, the rest of the group has moved on, but Larissa needs more opportunities to practice. And so it's precision work. Doing it in K1 is going to pay off in all of the grades, or K1 too. It's like getting it right in those foundational years. It's not that we're done, but we're closing the gap significantly.
When you suggest in kindergarten, like when is it okay, it's time to look at maybe scaling them back? Because in New Fly, everything is, it's interleaved. But when do you suggest, at what point, how many weeks in do you say, like we brought a group of kinders and where we went back to getting ready lessons and we're moving them through it again. But at what point do you say, like a month in, or at what point? Because kindergarten, a lot of those kids have never been exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think you look, and that's the nice thing about doing small group too, is in small group, you get a lot of in the moment behavioral data that tells you they're with me or they're not with me. And so I think, that's the data you use to understand, okay, when I do the second scoop, or if it's on track tomorrow, on track kids sometimes need 2 scoops too, so I think really being responsive to what the students are doing. And that's the other power of small groups. In our kindergarten, we start everybody in small groups, even though they're all at the same lesson. And we do that because of the power of really understanding where they are. They're also 90% English language learners. And so having that time with them in a smaller group where I can really make sure they're understanding me, so much more happens in that 20-minute time period than, if I did it in whole group. And so I do think that's the other thing. We have to help teachers get better at making those instructional decisions. And that comes from knowledge and experience. But saying, okay, did you see that 3 of your 4 kids at the end of the lesson really didn't know short A? I think I'm looking at my program, I'm seeing it's moving on to something else. I think I'm going to spend another day on short A to make sure they master it in this group, or pull them later in the day, or however you take care of that. But, that's just the way reading works. We go from simple to more complex and build that reading brain. So
thank you.
Yeah, but Shannon, it sounds like you're doing great work. I'm impressed.
Shannon, when you were talking about your administrators, this is something I think Amy has talked to us about before. Like if this is a progress monitoring graph, when we have our students coming in here below benchmark at the beginning of the year, and maybe this kiddo's on track at the beginning of the year, and if they all just continue to get good instruction, maybe both students are making progress and they're even like trending the same like rate of progress, but this bottom student, without more instruction or more practice or doing something different, it's not going to be gap closing enough to get them to on benchmark by the end of the year. So we might see like, okay, my instruction's effective, they're making progress, but if it's not gap closing, that's when you have to have those conversations about doing something more or different. And it sounds like that's what you're on the right track. So that little visual, I don't know, maybe that might help.
Oh, thanks for your questions and thanks for your amazing work. It sounds like you're making big changes in your district. Keep it up.
Where are you at, Shannon? Were you the one in North Carolina?
I'm in Currituck, North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were at the reading.
I was at the Reading League conference. I don't think I saw you guys. I don't know.
Bummer.
I went by the booth because trust me, I'm eyeing that doctorate program. I was like, But yeah, so
Awesome. Well, wonderful. Great. All right.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody for your time. I know it's getting late and we don't want to keep you, but definitely email us if you have questions. We're happy to respond, and really let us know what other webinars we can do that might be helpful. So,
Yes, please do. Thank you all.
good to see you, Dr. Archie. See you next week.